We look forward to assisting the next governor in the many challenges and opportunities he will face. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first candidate, which is Mr. Scott Angelle.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam President. It is great to be in this world-class city this morning as we gather on the last day of the first month of the year. Not too late for us to perhaps look at those New Year resolutions, and if we've already gone off track, especially for those of you who've been in New Orleans this last couple of days, can find a way to get back on track. Certainly look forward to, as President John Young said, that 49th Super Bowl tomorrow, and a great, great time to be here. Certainly when you take a look around, I want to offer my congratulations to Mayor Landrieu and the city council members and all the city leadership, the business leaders, the faith leaders, for certainly a town that is on its way to recovering from the storm season a decade ago in 2005. And I firmly believe that a robust New Orleans helps create a robust Louisiana. So again, congratulations to them. I'm excited to spend part of my day with folks who share my passion for local government, share my passion for building communities and neighborhoods, and share my passion that when we work together, we help to build a great state. I want to offer my congratulations to Roland D'Ortez and to the entire group here, Louisiana Police Jury Association. I can tell you, having sat aside Roland in the committee rooms in Baton Rouge, that Roland brings a tremendous amount of integrity and honor and smart policy making. I've often called Roland to get his advice on how we might want to change some of the policies in the state. So you're well represented. Roland brings that knowledge from all 64 parishes, and he comes to Baton Rouge, and all you can ever ask for folks that you negotiate with is they bring honor and integrity, and he certainly does that. So I'm very excited. I think Roland deserves a great deal of your support. You know, when I stop and think about where I've been for the last 25 years, I'm no stranger to the Police Jury Association. You know, having first been elected, as Lisa said, at age 25 to the St. Martin Parish Police Jury, to say that I understand you and I know you would be an understatement. Not only have I just worn the T-shirt, actually, I've lived that T-shirt. I know the sacrifices you and your families make, and to the families, I'm especially grateful because as your husband or wife or significant other may have run for office and agreed to serve, that was not what you actually signed up for. But I know so often some of the burden falls on you. You know, I'm reminded some of the things that we do, right? When it's a long day at work as a member of the police jury, and you are maybe just trying to get into the grocery store to pick up a few items because it's your responsibility that night to cook supper for the family, and you dart into the grocery store just to pick up those few items, and you find yourself pinned down in aisle number 14 between the bread and the luncheon loaf by that constituent, right, who looks at you and says, "Hey, how you doing?" To which you respond, "Hey, how's it going?" And that person then says, "Hey, you remember me?" At which your instincts say, "Absolutely, things are going okay." And then you get that dreaded question, "What's my name?" And we work through that as members of the police jury and parish councils. We work through that because we know that government that's closest to the people works the best. And that question may be about a pothole or the ball field or the cane field, but you work through it. But my efforts working with you didn't stop when I left parish government. Actually, when I became your Secretary of Natural Resources in 2004, I didn't stop listening to you. On matters affecting coastal and energy, I engaged with you. Often went with many of you to Washington, D.C. to tell our story about Louisiana. I held many of your hands as we took the Haynesville Shale and turned it in from a concept to America's #1 natural gas asset. I understand working with 64 parishes and over 300 municipalities and some 70+ school districts that together we can solve a lot more problems than we can apart. You know, as a person who started his public service as a member of the police jury closest to the people, I can tell you that I believe that many of our solutions are from the bottom up as opposed simply from the top down. I would tell you that I believe our best solutions are not found in the isolation of the state capitol. Rather, they found in constant communication between the State House and our courthouse. You know, this morning I'm excited to be a candidate for governor because I so firmly believe our best days are still ahead of us. I believe that Louisiana has not seen the greatest days that it can reveal to the people. And I believe that my education and experience uniquely qualify me to lead. And I would share with you that I believe that every election cycle is different. Every election cycle requires a different kind of leader as conditions on the ground change. And I do believe that our next governor needs to be a workhorse and not a show horse, and someone who's interested in getting the ball across the goal line and not necessarily worrying about the headline. You know, as I've crisscrossed the state here in the last 90 to 120 days, I've listened and I've learned. And what I've confirmed is that in this election cycle, people not only want a governor that's right on policy, they want a governor that's right on people. And in my mind, being right on policy means that you got to be pro-business, pro-energy, pro-family, pro-life, pro-gun ownership, pro-economic development, pro-job creation, pro-local government. As the son of a conservative father, as the son of a police juror, I learned at an early age the value of education, homework, and teamwork. As the son of a God-fearing mother who gave birth to 9 children, I was lucky enough to be taught at an early age the value of life, in that an unborn is not a potential life, but a life with potential. And Mom also showed us to be aware of not only the gentleness, but indeed the strength of a woman's love and a woman's touch. I'm a brother to 8 siblings who shared the most incredible dysfunctional kitchen table you could ever imagine on a nightly basis. But we learned to get along, and we learned to respect the rights of and opinions of one another. And you know, just doing that was just an incredible way to prepare yourself for public service, I would say. You know, my mom and dad raised us that our community, our state, our nation, our church is a reflection of our own individual effort. And if you wanted to make a difference, if you wanted to see a change, you had to get off the sideline and get onto the playing field. Like you, I have chosen to devote much of my adult life to that playing field. And as a husband and father of 5, Diane and I certainly understand that what a family needs is love, faith, and an opportunity for employment. And I think the governor can help in all 3 of those areas. So with 16 years of local government experience, I would say, with all due respect, that I believe my resume qualifies me more to understand the issues that you have in local government, perhaps more than any candidate in a long time for governor in this state. I think now more than ever, you need a governor with his hands on the steering wheel, that understands, fundamentally understands what you do every day and wants to be part of a team bringing about solutions. Just like Louisiana can't wait on Washington to make us great, you shouldn't have to wait on the ideas that are coming out of the state capitol to make yourself great. We ought to perhaps take a look at some of the shackles that we have put on local government in this state, take them off, and allow you to do some of the great things that you know how to do in your area. And if one parish wants to do them and another parish doesn't, that's okay too. Never has one size fit all always worked when it comes to government. So I would say when picking your next governor, I think a good starting point is to take a look at history. I was proud to be elected to the executive board of the Louisiana Police Jury Association, working with you on a variety of issues ranging from transportation to health care. As your natural resource secretary, I was intimately involved with the parishes against coastal erosion, finding funding for that group from time to time, again, traveling with you to D.C. to testify and to tell America that not only do we produce the energy to fuel this country, but that our fishermen and our farmers also feed this country. And that coastal Louisiana is a place worth investing. We all connected to coastal Louisiana through the gas pump, and it's as important piece of real estate as it is here in Louisiana as it ought to be the folks in Montana and New York. I want to be part of a generation that brings that message across, no question. You know, I made sure that when we receive federal coastal restoration money, that the parishes had a direct appropriation, some 35% set aside for the parishes directly. So you didn't have to go and fight in the appropriations process in Baton Rouge to perhaps end up with a crumb, that there would be, at the very beginning, a well-understood philosophy that you were entitled to some of that money so you could do some of the work that you needed to do. I was happy to work with then Representative Rick Gallo to find ways to increase the trigger mechanism on how we would provide severance taxes to you that was dedicated to fixing roads. Because at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer and have preached across this state that 100% of the severance taxes that are collected in this state have to be first hosted by one of the 64 parishes. The activity that produces timber and oil and gas and sulfur and salt, all of those things which are severed from the earth cannot happen without a cooperating parish. So the 64 parishes that in fact do help us absolutely was right and smart public policy to make sure that we would share some of that with you. When I became your lieutenant governor in 2010, I again rallied with you. I made sure that when the White House responded and tried to shut down our way of life in the Gulf of Mexico following the BP event, that I refused to say it would be okay and we're going to be all right. And I didn't do it on behalf of Exxon or Chevron. I did it on behalf of the Louisiana workers whose way of life was being threatened. Went to Washington, testified, organized, made sure that Washington heard our voice. We got that drilling moratorium lifted. Instead of 6 months, we got it lifted at the 4.5-month period. We went into a permittatorium. I continue to work with strategies to get that lifted. I'm proud to say that many of our phone calls included chamber officials, local government elected officials, and I'm proud to say that today there are more rigs working in the Gulf of Mexico today than there was at the time of the BP event. That didn't happen because of good luck. It happened because of good management, and I'm proud to have worked with you on that. You know, because when you stop and think about it, it again wasn't just about the tugboat owner, it was about the tugboat mechanic. It wasn't about the restaurant owner only, but it was about the restaurant worker, or the store owner, but the store clerk as well. Not just the auto dealer who could sell cars, but the auto mechanic who perhaps was going to be out of a job. So I would tell you, as you wrap up your convention and begin to go back into your very unique parishes, I'm reminded of the words of the famous basketball coach, John Wooden. Coach Wooden teaches us that cooperation is more about what's right than who's right. And there ought to be room in Baton Rouge, in the governor's office, for having the confidence to open your vest and tell those 64 parishes and those 300 municipalities and those 70-plus school districts to come and be a part of the solution. You know, by only working in a spirit of collaboration and cooperation do I think we can get some of the great things that we need to get done in this state. And again, I would finally say that having had the opportunity to work in a lot of different areas, I have found one thing and one thing to be true. Once a police juror, always a police juror. You got a chance to send a police juror to Governor's Mansion. Don't miss the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Let me thank you first for your service. Anytime you have an opportunity to speak to a group of elected officials, I want to say thank you for what you do. I think all of us understand what it's like to offer ourselves for public service. It's a choice that we make, obviously. We depend on the people to decide whether or not we're worthy of a job. So I thank you very much for your service. Scott's story about the grocery store reminded me of one of my experiences after a long day at the Senate. Oftentimes when the legislature gathers, as all of you know, there's social gatherings after the session. I went by one of those gatherings, put on the hello, my name is J. Dardenne name tag, and said hello to a few people and hustled off, remembering that on the way home I'm supposed to stop at Albertsons and get some bread and some milk. So I do so, and I get the bread and the milk, and I get in the less than 15 items, the express lane that is never express, and stand in the express lane for a little while, minding my business, and somebody taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's a guy in an old dirty T-shirt, and he's wearing a baseball cap. He's obviously been working all day, and he says, "Did you guys pass a law we got to label our elected officials?" I said, "No." And I tore that thing off and never have put one on again. That's a true story, though. I did begin my career as a Metro councilman in Baton Rouge, not a police jury system, of course, a mayor-president system parish-wide, and it was a wonderful opportunity. The first chance I took to run for public office was in the state Senate. The year before I went to the Metro Council, I got beat, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had a chance to serve in local government and did so for one term, a little bit less than one term. And at that time, I learned a lot, and I completely agree that the local government that serves closest to the people absolutely governs best. When you talk about the federal government, you talk about the state government, you talk about local government, you get things done at local government, you get it done quickly. I had an opportunity to author 3 great pieces of legislation while I was on the Metro Council, and it was an anti-smoking ordinance long before it's the thing to do these days. I'd promised a lady on the campaign trail I was going to propose that, and I did. I called it the Clean Indoor Air Act. After my best friend on the council, who was a chain smoker, got through with it, it was the Semi-Clean Indoor Air Act. But we nonetheless enacted it into Baton Rouge, one of the first cities in the state to do so. And I experienced a flood in my district in South Baton Rouge. Much of that area that you see developed in South Baton Rouge now was not developed back in the late 80s because it was really part of the alluvial valley of the Mississippi River. My area flooded almost completely, homes that had been built, and I decided we needed a flood damage prevention ordinance in Baton Rouge. Developers didn't like that. Engineers said it couldn't be done. A lot of people didn't want to fool with doing it. We had a series of meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday mornings for about 2 months, and everybody showed up to protect their interest. So we had developers, we had hydrologists, we had engineers, we had homeowners associations, and I told them, we're going to do something to fix this. And at the end of a couple of months, we enacted the flood damage prevention ordinance in Baton Rouge. And to my knowledge, not a single home that has been built in accordance with that new ordinance has flooded since then due to natural causes. You have to build your houses up, you have to build retention ponds. Those things happen at a local government level when you can talk to people and communicate with people and listen to what their concerns are. I went to the Senate. I spent 15 years there. 8 years I was on the inside, 7 years I was on the outside. I understood how to get things done when you were, quote, in control and when you are not in control. I learned that there's a red button and a green button. There's not a yellow button. You got to make decisions, and when you make decisions, you're not going to please everybody, but you have to make a decision when you're in a leadership role and when you're trying to chart a direction for this state that you think is different than the one it was going in. And that's where I was when I first started in the Senate, but we were able to get some things done over an 8-year period when I was Governor Foster's floor leader and had a great opportunity to create a change in Louisiana, create a community college system, create a motion picture industry that about a decade later is now the #1 feature film destination in the United States of America, and for that matter, North America. If you have a little bit of vision, you see what can happen if you introduce something different, you diversify the economy, some great things can happen, and they have happened, and it's been a very positive thing for the state. Had an opportunity to advance ethics laws. I remember in my first session in the Senate, the laws I proposed, I sat in the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee, which I later chaired, and the chairman looked at me and said, Senator Dardenne, do you want us to kill your bills all at once or take them one at a time? And I said, I'd like you to take them one at a time. And many of those proposals became law under the first term in Governor Angelle, so I'm happy to see those things finally happen. But most importantly, I got to chair the Senate Finance Committee and vice chair for 4 years, chairman for 4 years. I've balanced the budget of this state. I've wrestled with the problems that we have, and we've never had the severity of problems that we have right now from a financial standpoint. The next governor and the next legislature are going to be faced with a financial challenge perhaps greater than any we've seen in our lifetime. Because we haven't handled the budget like we should have. We haven't handled it like we did during the 4 years that I was chairman. Some good years, some bad years. Making decisions, tough decisions, saying no to people who didn't want to be said no to. But you have to do that if you're going to lead and you're going to make the kind of decisions that are in the best interest of the public, and that's what I had to do. The people of this state gave me the opportunity to be their Secretary of State and a time after Katrina, not immediately after Katrina, but in a year after Katrina. I got elected the year after Katrina hit, had to deal with the aftermath of that, make sure local elections came off well, make sure people's rights were protected. Those were not here had an opportunity to vote, but not vote twice, and make certain that if they were going to be Louisianians, they were going to vote. If they were not Louisianians, they were not going to vote. We created the Heroes and Heritage Trail with an interest in trying to make sure that your communities, your parishes that have small museums could flourish. We brought those museums together and gave them an identity. From Oil City to Abbeville, museums were able to flourish as a result of really signage, something as simple as signage on the roadway. And you've seen some of these brown signs that were created during my tenure as Secretary of State to point the way to these museums that are off the beaten path, but that are important to local communities, and they're important for people who want to understand and learn what Louisiana is all about. That was perhaps the most fun I had as Secretary of State, not dealing with elections, but dealing with this museum system that had really been forgotten and not brought together as a single unit. But I'm happy to tell you that it is now, and it's flourishing now. The people gave me the opportunity to be their lieutenant governor, and I've stood for that election twice. And since I've been there, tourism has dramatically increased in this state because we set some priorities on spending. We recognized what we needed to do to go attract people to Louisiana. Last year, international visitation increased in Louisiana by 18%, the largest percentage increase in the United States of America. That's because we targeted international marketplaces and tried to identify Louisiana with those foreign countries, because in many ways we are a foreign country with all the influence we've had from our very beginning. When I've traveled across America and when I've traveled overseas, I have sought visitors and investors in Louisiana, not electoral votes. And my emphasis has been on trying to bring people to our state. And they've come in record numbers the past several years. We'll announce, I think in a few weeks, I hope, another record year in 2014. But we know the two previous years were record-setting years. 27 million people visiting our state. This city is the magnet. They come into Louisiana primarily through New Orleans for conventions, for leisure travel, because the only air service is really here. But we've put a focus on stretching them out across the state of Louisiana, telling them how they can get to every nook and cranny of the state and all the fascinating things they can see outside of this great city. And people are coming to your cities, and they're coming in record numbers. More than $10 billion spent in Louisiana last year by people who don't live here. That translates to $800 million in state tax revenue that none of you paid and none of your constituents paid. That's a marketplace for us, and we can't forget it. And that's been done with a dramatically reduced budget. We had a $22 million budget that one year took a $14 million hit. But we've nonetheless been successful in convincing people to come here because we've prioritized spending. We've done what's most important to make sure that we were successful. I now want to be your governor, and I think as you look at the candidates for governor and you decide who ought to be the leader of this state, you ought to take into account several very important factors, not the least of which is integrity. Who has served in office with integrity, stood before the people of Louisiana and created a record of which we can be proud, and someone we can say, I'm proud to have that person serve in elected office, just like all of you seek to do in your positions as police jurors. You want to have somebody who has the ability and the effectiveness to get things done. I think in my time in public service, I have proven an ability to be effective to make sure that we get things done. You want someone who's going to be open and transparent in the way government operates. I think it's very important to instill confidence in the people of this state that they feel like their government is open to them, that their governor is open to them, and that he is going to be seen around the state and travel around the state. Many of you in North Louisiana know that I've been in your communities many, many times. I've visited virtually every state, every parish in the state, and spoken to elected officials, spoken to Kiwanis clubs and other meetings to talk about Louisiana, to make people feel proud about this great state that we call home. There is no question that our best days are ahead of us. And it's appropriate, I guess, that your meeting is here at the Marriott on Canal Street. You know, back after Louisiana first became a state, Congress appropriated a lot of money to build a canal. They knew that New Orleans was low and it needed help. A big canal was to be built, but as Congress is wont to do, they funded about half of it, and then they stopped. And that canal was covered up, and now it's Canal Street. That's why it's so wide. That's why it's so broad. And in the early days of New Orleans, it was the dividing line. French and Spanish and Creole people stayed on the French Quarter side of Canal Street. The new folks in town, these Americans from Kentucky and Tennessee who came west after the Louisiana Purchase, they stayed on the other side of Canal. That's the American sector. But finally, those folks got together, as we've done in Louisiana, and became one. Canal Street, the neutral ground, originally a dividing line, was then a place where people could come together. And it happened, and perhaps symbolically and importantly for Louisiana, in the Battle of New Orleans in 1815. We celebrated the bicentennial of the Battle of New Orleans earlier this month, January 8th, when a ragtag group of Louisianians that looked just like you look, Creoles, slave owners, slaves, new Americans from outside of the South, Creoles who'd never taken up arms before, all rallied behind a foreigner, General Andrew Jackson, who came from Tennessee and protected this city and won the Battle of New Orleans against the mightiest army in the world. Louisiana came together 3 years after it became a state, and Louisiana needs to come together now. We don't need to be divided. We need someone who can unite us, someone who can bridge gaps, someone who is not worried about partisan politics but is worried about what can make Louisiana better. And I believe, based on my experience, I'm able to do that. And I appreciate what you do as police jurors. I ask you for your support as governor, and I assure you Louisiana's best days will be ahead of us. Thanks very much.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you this morning. What a great morning to be in New Orleans, and I want to thank you for your service to your constituents, to your parishes, and to the great state of Louisiana. I, like Jay and Scott, and I want to thank them for being here this morning as well, think our best days are ahead of us. But we better not ignore the challenges that are right in front of us right now either, and we want to talk about that in just a moment. I will echo what's been said this morning. You have an excellent team in Baton Rouge. I've been working with Roland and the rest of the team. This will be my 8th year. They do an extraordinary job of making sure that we are aware of what's most important to you as we move forward so that you can do your job, which is so incredibly important. We talk about where the rubber hits the road. It's right under your feet every day, and I know that. I see someone in the group this morning that I need to single out. My parish president, Gordon Burgess, who announced last week that he will not seek re-election next year. I guess 8 terms are enough, Mr. Gordon. But thank you and Miss Margaret very much for your service to Tangipahoa Parish. Scott's got me beat. I was one of 8 children. That's the only place he's going to beat me, okay? But I was one of 8 children, and I sat around the table at night too, and sometimes it was dysfunctional. My mother was an emergency room nurse in the charity hospital system for 30 years. And she came home every night telling us what she had done that day and how important it was, because she was able to help the lives of people who really needed help. My dad was the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff at the time, and so we saw what it was like to be committed to public service. I am married to my high school sweetheart, and we've got 3 children, 2 of whom are in college, and a boy who is in the 7th grade. He sort of snuck up on us a little bit, but we're glad to have him. I represent a rural district, a poor district. I represent northern Tangipahoa Parish, all of St. Helena, and the piece of northeast East Feliciana Parish. I know what you do every day. I know how important it is that you're out there doing your work, and I also know that it's not a part-time job, perhaps as it was advertised, because you are going to be questioned, whether it's at the grocery store, the restaurant, at the ball game, coming out of church. You're going to be asked about that road. You're going to be asked about that ditch or that culvert or whatever it is that happens to be going on, and I appreciate that. And at the end of the day, you go to those meetings and you're going to either vote yes or no for various initiatives. And that can be tough too, because there's no way to satisfy everybody. We all know that. I know that in the legislature. You either yay or you're nay. And quite honestly, sometimes there's reasons to be both ways. But you got to make a decision about what you think is best for the people that you represent, and you do that all the time. And I appreciate that very much. Now, the truth of the matter is, I stand before you today. We are contemplating going into session with a $1.6 billion problem in our budget to fix for next year. And that would be bad enough, because that's a huge number. And sometimes you get a big enough number and people don't understand just how big it is. It doesn't seem real. But it's the 7th consecutive year of budget cuts. So that's where we are. And I don't want you to lose sight of this. Based on what we are projecting for the future, We've got 4 more years where the deficits are going to get up close to $2 billion. And that is because we have persistently refused to acknowledge the challenge ahead of us and make the hard decisions and correct the structural problems in the state government of Louisiana. I, as in the legislature, have not been enabling our governor to do that. I just want you to know. I have been opposed to this governor on many of his initiatives that I think were heading us in the wrong direction, which we are seeing now in a very real way. I have not been able to vote for these budgets in the last few years because of the problems that we were just kicking down the road, where they're just going to grow and threaten the things that are most important to you and to all of us, such as higher education. We have already cut, over the last 7 years, $700 million state support for higher education. That's $700 million less that they're going to get this year than they were getting 8 years ago. And on the table before us right now is another proposal to cut them by as much as $300 million more. So cutting higher education by $1 billion is not in our best interest. We cannot be the state we want to be if that's the direction we go. And by the way, over the same time period, our kids are paying 90% more for their tuition when they go to school this fall, in August of 2015. That's only replaced a fraction of the state support that's been lost. And why does that make a difference to you? Because as we cut universities and we cut community technical colleges, we are not going to have the ability to sustain the workforce initiatives that we need to produce the jobs right here in Louisiana for our people so that they can participate in this economic expansion, live the American dream right here. Now, do we have opportunities? Absolutely we have opportunities. But we cannot realize those opportunities unless we rise to the challenge that's before us. And I want you to know, when it comes to going forward about doing things differently, you should take into consideration those people who've been standing up to Governor Angelle over the last several years, not now when he's below 40% in popularity, but back when it was hard, when he was at 70%. And you'll find John Bell Edwards was there, and the things that I said then were very much on the mark, and they have directed us, those problems have directed us to exactly where we are today. And it's important because when we have money problems, it's not just higher education where the problems concentrate. It's not just health care. Money is money, and when it's short, it threatens those initiatives that you are worried about, whether it's the Community Development Block Grant Program, whether it's the LGAP, whether it's the Community Water Enrichment Fund. All of these things are incredibly important. I've already told you I represent 3 rural poor parishes. These things are incredibly important for you all to be able to do your job. Now, with respect to the Transportation Trust Fund, there is nothing that is more important to you to make sure that your people have a quality of life and they can get to and from work, to and from school, and they can run their businesses more than transportation infrastructure. Right now, the law says that you've got to get a minimum of 1 cent out of the 16 cents. And there are some people who think that that's all you ought to get. But the fact of the matter is, 1 cent would give you $30 million. In the current budget, you're getting $46 million. I don't believe that you ought to be cut $16 million. And the reason is because we don't give you the option at the local level of levying a tax on fuel in order to pay for roads. We take that to ourselves in Baton Rouge, and so it's incumbent on us to share with you. And we do that presently. We ought to continue to do that. And right now, you're getting $38 million a year for road projects. And we require you to have a priority program. So we ought to continue to do that. I'm 100% committed as your next governor to make sure that we protect all of these initiatives, but especially that Transportation Trust Fund spending for those rural roads. It's not an obligation. I'm sorry, it's not a diversion. It's not improper that we do that. It is a state obligation. Now, I know that you are directly accountable to the people. I know you work hard, and that's why I was very proud. In 2008, in my very first year, one of the first bills that I introduced was a bill that would allow you, if you decided, to raise your pay as police jurors from $1,200 to $1,600 a month. Some of you have done it, and some of you hadn't, and that's entirely up to you. But I thought that it was the right thing to do for the state to allow you to do that. It's another one of those areas where, for whatever reason, the state has seen fit to manage your affairs, and I wanted to give you a little more flexibility there. And we have a lot of other serious issues, by the way. One of the serious issues we have is the other day, St. Peter realized that there had been a mix-up, and there were 3 professionals who were supposed to get into heaven, and he had turned them away, and they ended up in hell, and he was really embarrassed, but he called God, and he said, you know, I'm very embarrassed to tell you, but I sent away 3 of your professionals, a farmer, a teacher, and a doctor, and they're down in hell. And God said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. So God called Satan, and he said, Satan, you've got 3 of my professionals, I need them back. And Satan said, oh no, the more the merrier, I've got them now, they're mine. And God said, well, I'm going to sue the horns off of you. And Satan said, where are you going to find a lawyer? So I don't really like lawyer jokes, but I heard that one the other day, and I wanted to share that one with you. They tend to hit a little too close to home. But there are other serious issues, more serious than the one that I just told you about. I was at an oil and gas forum this week, and one of the questions I was asked, well, will you support legislation to prevent parishes from filing lawsuits to try to get coastal erosion damages? I said, no, I will not. I said, courts exist to resolve legal disputes, and if a parish wants to file a lawsuit, then they ought to be able to do that. And if you've got a defense, you ought to be able to go to court and offer your defense. I said, but people in Baton Rouge ought not be trying to lord over our local governments like that and say that you're not going to be allowed to file a lawsuit. Now, if you do it, that's fine, and if you don't do it, that's fine. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. What I am suggesting is the people in Baton Rouge ought to stop making these laws that are so restrictive on you, and I will not support any initiative. And look, I'm for a strong and vibrant oil and gas industry in Louisiana. It benefits all of us. But we also have to have accountability, and we have to have local governments with the ability to make decisions for themselves as they move forward. Another important issue is inmate health care. Back when we had a charity hospital system, we had one way of delivering that health care, and we all have grown accustomed to it. We don't have that system anymore, and getting health care for the inmates is a responsibility that you all share with your sheriffs, and you know that. Right now, we're budgeting $50 million. What happens when the costs exceed $50 million, and by how much is the cost going to grow beyond $50 million, and who's responsible for that? That's something you don't really know because there hasn't been an effective partnership with state government and local government to work through all of these challenges. That will change when I'm governor. You will have a seat at the table when we fashion these new policies, and you're going to have input. Another thing, we've talked a lot about the coast, and there's a whole lot going on the coast, and we can all be thankful for it. God has blessed us richly. Our geography is great. We're on the Mississippi River. We're on the Gulf of Mexico. We have been blessed with hydrocarbons under the ground. It's a wonderful thing. But I just want to stop for a minute and point out that if you go back to the end of the recession in fall of 2010, and you mark job growth in Louisiana, it has all been in South Louisiana. When you get to Alexandria and points north, job growth in that period, since the end of the recession now, has been either 0 or negative. We have got to have somebody working in the governor's office who will make sure that the state as a whole benefits when there's economic development. You cannot do that when you cut $1 billion out of higher education because your community and technical colleges can't train and certify your workers. Your universities are not going to be able to educate your people. You're not going to have the wherewithal to advance and prosper the way that we should. And so we can't keep pretending that all is going well because it is not. We have to stand up and figure out where we are and chart a better path forward. Now, I found out that you all have a new group in your midst. It's a Committee of Military and Veterans Affairs, I believe members of the police jury. I want to thank you very much for doing that. I've been serving on the House Committee of Military and Veterans Affairs for a number of years now. I was chairman of that group. And I look forward to working with you all as you identify the needs of veterans and as you realize the importance and promote the active duty military that are already in Louisiana who add so much to our state, not just to our national defense, but also to our state economy. So yes, we have lots of challenges. We have lots of opportunities. I would just ask you to consider entrusting the governor's office to someone who has realized over the last several years that the direction the state of Louisiana is going is not the direction we need to go if we want to be the state that we all want, where our kids and grandkids can stay here, realize the American dream, not have to go out of college to get an education, I should say out of state, to get a college education, because we know that when that happens, that's where they meet their boyfriends and girlfriends, that's where they get their first job offers, and before long, if we're lucky, they're coming home at Christmas to tell us hello. We cannot afford that in Louisiana. Our people deserve better than that. Our people deserve a bold, visionary governor with the courage to confront our problems, chart a better path forward, and I am that person. I ask for your help. I will be on the ballot come October the 24th, and I'll be, with your help, in the governor's office next January. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for inviting us today, and thanks in particular to Roland D'Artes and the staff for hosting this forum. I would really have loved to be there. In fact, I've been there every year of recent years, but I have a long-standing commitment to be out of town for the weekend to celebrate Wendy's birthday. You know, as I've clearly said, beginning this race for governor, becoming Louisiana's next governor will be my last political job, elected or appointed, period. I'm running for governor to confront our biggest challenges head on, not to avoid them, not to play politics with them. And I will confront those challenges, including by partnering, working directly with you, getting your ideas and input, and proposing clear, straightforward solutions. That's what I've always done. I can say in that regard without a doubt that I've worked more closely with you all and with this organization than any other candidate here. That starts with the commitment I made when I was first elected to the U.S. Senate to hold a town hall meeting in every parish, every Congress. I've done just that. I've been in each of your parishes many times, no matter how big or small. I've hosted more than 382 in-person town hall meetings. Just recently, I've hosted town halls in Napoleonville and Breaux Bridge, Cameron, Columbia, St. Francisville, and I'll continue to do that. In addition to my regular town hall meetings, I've hosted 182 telephone town hall meetings with all of your constituents around Louisiana. And of course, I've heard directly from you as local leaders in all of your parishes. You have my cell phone number, and I want to give it to you again so you can stay in contact with me, 504-256-2300. Partnering with you, working directly with you, has also led to major accomplishments. I remember after Hurricane Katrina and Rita, I held almost daily conference calls with many of you around the state, and that was incredibly valuable for us to get results for Louisiana and for all of our parishes and communities. Because of that direct communication, we were able to have a unified, bipartisan effort in getting the recovering dollars that we needed for Louisiana. We're able to secure together community disaster loans and then loan forgiveness, so local folks weren't stuck footing the bill for a full and robust recovery. Many of those regular calls led to our office being able to directly help individuals receive assistance or help them navigate through the federal bureaucracies like FEMA. Our partnership together has also led to many community development block grants and other law enforcement grants to encourage local economic development and to help build safer communities. I'm also very comfortable and confident in saying that no candidate for governor this year has accomplished more concrete things through important bipartisan work. For instance, in the U.S. Senate, I'm proud to have passed several major pieces of legislation, including critical infrastructure legislation. Most recently, the Water Resources Reform and Development Act of 2014, or WRDA. This was a huge win for Louisiana that will provide significant coastal restoration, hurricane flood protection, reform to the Corps of Engineers, accelerated projects, and of course, jobs. It's easily one of the most important bills for Louisiana we've passed in Congress, and we got it done with a strong bipartisan and open process. The former chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee and my co-author of WRDA was Barbara Boxer from San Francisco, California. Now, she and I are as far apart on the political spectrum as it gets. We don't come from different sides of that spectrum in the U.S. Senate. We define the spectrum. But we put differences aside. We got to work. We passed important, in fact, major legislation. Continuing my commitment to bipartisan accomplishments, Barbara Boxer and I authored and passed a reauthorization of the federal highway bill, known as MAP 21, in committee last year to improve roads and build safer bridges. We'll be working together again this year on passing a highway bill which will have huge benefits for Louisiana. In fact, in that regard, I was just selected as the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee, and I've already started working on that new highway bill. My priority as chair this year will be to build on the bipartisan success and address 4 common sense solutions for improving Louisiana's transportation infrastructure and our quality of life. 1, dedicating more Highway Trust Fund monies to relieving traffic congestion so we can carry on our daily routines in a safe, time-effective manner. This is critical when picking up the kids from school, bringing them to soccer practice. 2, giving states and locals more flexibility, including to bundle projects together. This bundling will streamline the approval process, consolidate unnecessary paperwork, and maximize efficiency to complete projects on schedule. 3, prioritizing construction for high-priority projects like I-49 South and dedicating more federal funds to fix our state's many deficient bridges, including local bridges. 4, expanding the new freight program in MAP 21 to reduce truck congestion by targeting funds to build additional lanes and improve the flow of commerce along our nation's highways. It also improves safety measures, provides more funding certainty, and expands opportunity for infrastructure investment in rural areas. I will lead us as our next governor by continuing to partner with you and by continuing this bipartisan work and record of success. I was the first candidate for governor to announce real ideas to tackle Louisiana's challenges. Just a couple of weeks ago, I announced 2 major policy proposals related to stabilizing the state budget and building a world-class highway and infrastructure system. The first proposal is that immediately upon being sworn in as governor, I'll call a special session of the legislature on fundamental spending and tax reform to stabilize the state budget and promote greater job growth. At the center of this effort will be 3 things. First, cutting back on the spending dedications and restrictions that make balancing the budget much more difficult in a slow economy. Second, re-examining all state tax credits, exemptions, and deductions based on an objective cost-benefit analysis. And 3, lowering some taxes and rates to spur job growth and with it state revenue. Governor Jindal should be doing this now. I'll do it the minute I'm sworn in. We need to break out of the never-ending cycle we're in of budget chaos, including cuts to vital areas like higher ed. And a 4th area I will absolutely focus on in this special session will be to greatly strengthen the Transportation Trust Fund. This can be done by greatly curtailing trust fund dollars from being spent on things other than transportation needs, and ensuring that trust fund revenue sources like the vehicle sales tax actually get in to the trust fund. It's time we put trust back into the Transportation Trust Fund by not siphoning off tax money people pay for roads and bridges and spending it on other stuff. The second policy proposal I made a few weeks ago is this. Sometime after that initial special session and during my first term, I will also develop and propose, again partnering with you and others, a targeted highway building plan. This plan will be comprised of specific high-priority projects and specific revenue tied to completing them on an expedited basis. This is absolutely essential to encourage and handle large industrial and other projects and to relieve horrible and growing traffic congestion in many areas. I'm tired of poor roads and mounting traffic in Louisiana. We can do better, and we must do better, or else big industrial projects and the great jobs that go with them will go somewhere else. Now, I want to make 2 points related to transportation infrastructure. First, at the last forum I engaged in, hosted by engineers and contractors and other business leaders, one of my opponents stated that only up to 1 cent of the state gas tax should be given to locals to fund local transportation projects, that we should cut back on that money going to locals. He said locals currently get more than the 1 cent, and that needs to be decreased. I completely disagree. We should not cut local transportation funding to fill budget deficits created by the state administration. Again, we need to restore trust in the Transportation Trust Fund, and I'll do that by working to increase the local option transportation revenue source. Maybe we should have additional revenue available through a vote of the people at the local level to be a local option transportation revenue source. By considering this sort of local option for road fund revenue, you'll have more say, more control, more ability to govern your own destiny. In closing, let me just say again, I'm running for governor for one reason: to provide strong leadership and to address head-on the key issues that confront Louisiana with your help, with an active partnership. That's exactly the opposite, quite frankly, that we've experienced in the last several years under the current administration. That administration has avoided the big issues, not confronted them, and they certainly haven't partnered with you. And a lot of that fault goes to the governor, Bobby, but also his political inner circle that have carried out that method of government. That has to stop. As governor, I'll make sure it stops. I'll continue to depend on your ideas, your partnership, your vision, and leadership. Again, I know a lot of you have my personal cell phone number, have had it for years, but please feel free to keep it, use it. It hasn't changed. 504-256-2300. I want to hear from all of you. Thanks again for hosting this important forum. I look forward to seeing you all soon during this exciting election year. Even more importantly, I look forward to partnering with all of you to really meet head-on the challenges we face together in Louisiana.